Hey guys, welcome back to my bedroom. Today's conversation is going to be around connecting with others. Personally, I think that social connection is an integral part of recovery, and it's one of the bigger parts that gives our lives meaning. It's our innate human nature to want to connect with others over isolate. I think all of humanity's best projects were done as a collaborative rather than just one individual, even if that's not always the story we tell. I can totally empathize that some of the discussions may sound a bit hokey and can be really easy to say, but a lot more challenging to implement and actively live. There's something about addiction that makes it really easy to isolate, and it gives you an understanding that life in the world comes with a certain underlying level of pain and discomfort, which makes it really difficult to reach out and want to connect with others. Using exercise or self-compassion or connection doesn't take away that pain, but it makes it easier to cope with and handle. It makes it easier to manage it and move on. These are healthier alternatives to drinking every time. Addiction in its most dangerous form is almost synonymous with isolation. Substance abuse removes the ability to care about or think about anything other than using. It shrinks your world to a point where connection can't happen. Someone struggling with addiction can't get past thinking past their next dose. And often they wind up destroying relationships in the process a lot of the time. Not intentionally, but just as a circumstance or side effect of the drive for the substance. Although you can't fix somebody else's addiction, it's really vital to support connection and recovery and to help them through that process, especially in early sobriety. It's damn near impossible to recover on your own in isolation. I would have never been able to do it. My form of connection has always been being very open and honest about recovery. I'm a deeply vulnerable person, which can be both a blessing and a curse at times. In early recovery, I was very open about it, even telling both of the people that I interviewed with for my jobs that I was in early sobriety. Mind you, one was selling alcohol and the other was watching children, so there was a bit of a moral obligation to my disclosures, but even still, being open and honest about that gave me a sense of accountability and created a connection with these people right off the bat. I had the freedom to be open and candid with both of the bosses that I worked with in very different ways, but both in ways that were really important and beneficial for my recovery. Early recovery felt a lot more unstable, like there were people watching to see when I would relapse again and mess up, so it was very helpful to have people who were there to support me and kind of cheer me on. I definitely noticed that in the first year of my sobriety, people were a lot more vocal as well with their praise and with their admiration of what I was doing. It's quieted down quite a bit in the second year of sobriety. As a result, 2 years on, I'm finding making and building connections a lot harder. Maintaining friendships is really difficult as an adult, and the fact that I've moved quite a bit also doesn't really tend to lead to close proximity friendships. Most people will make their friendships and connections through work and school, and I usually work with tiny humans, so that's a little bit harder to do, to make connections with them. And my school, like everybody else's, was just shut down through this pandemic, so that social interaction has also been lost. It's not really talked about a whole lot, but proximity plays a huge role in maintaining friendships in adulthood. It's a lot easier to go and visit somebody and check in when they live 10 minutes away rather than when they live an hour away in a different city. I can understand and recognize that I'm the common denominator in the instability in my relationships and the fact that nothing has really been maintained for about a decade. So I realized that there's something about my approach or my intensity to my personality that kind of draws people off and makes connection harder. Something is telling me that that's more than just being a victim of circumstance and is likely a common thing with people who struggle with addiction, where their intensity is a lot for people, and so connecting with others is very hard. I think that's why it's important to look into programs like group counseling or smart recovery or things like that. But this is also where I start to talk about AA, and surprise, I'm going to actually give them credit in this video. One of the things that AA does extremely well is foster connection between struggling addicts and people who are in early recovery. It creates a space for people who are struggling with addiction and therefore isolation to feel safe and calm and belong. AA wants new members, and it wants to foster that support and reliance on the group. It builds that community feeling. In my second attempt at the program, I met a group of women who I really connected with, and through a lot of shared time together, we bonded and created really great friendships. We would spend time together outside of the meetings regularly. We would go to events and spend time at the beach hanging out and having discussions about life and sobriety all the time. AA sets up a really good foundation for connection by seeing the same people over and over again consistently and knowing that you already have something in common. You drink. Through regular meetings, you start to recognize similar faces and hear parts of your own story and other people's story, which makes it a lot easier for someone who struggles with approach to feel connected and to feel included by this group. AA meetings are often the first place that people who have been isolating feel safe and seen, and new members are often greeted with a lot of warmth and compassion and celebration and inclusion, and it can feel really good to have that connection. And this is super important for recovery. Another thing that AA does really well for connection is set up events and retreats that make for really good focused time for connection. These aren't always structured like meetings, and they're some of my favorite memories from being in the program. I loved going to shows and festivals and games with my fellow sober friends and feeling that sense of connection and community between us. Especially moving into a new city, that was so important for me to open myself up to new experiences and to get to know the city that I was in. Reflecting back, I'm still grateful that I gave the program a second shot when I moved to the GTA, because those women definitely helped me smooth out a rocky transition into a new city and figuring out my sobriety on my own. I really did bond with these women, but like most things related to the program, it didn't last after I left. AA is really, really excellent at fostering community and fellowship within the program, but like other things that kind of follow a structure and a rule-based program, they don't really leave space for anyone on the outside. AA as a community is very internally focused. Friendships are often formed through consistent proximity and bonding and going to the same meetings over and over again, which is good, but it's very small. It's kind of encouraged that you cut off the connections that you have outside of the group. And while this can be good for early sobriety and people who are struggling with recovery or friends that are in active addiction, it also strengthens your reliance and dependence on the group and makes it a lot harder to leave. Another thing that frustrates me is the immediate dismissal and disconnection from the group if you do decide that the program isn't for you and that you need to leave. It kind of felt like a shunning, and it just shows how superficial and dependent on the program that these relationships were, for me at least. Even with the few women that I had built bonded connections with, these immediately disappeared once I left the program. Some of it can be chalked up to the fact that I was no longer going to the same spaces as them and seeing them on a regular basis, but there was also a level of disengagement and disconnection whenever I did try to reach out or make plans to do something outside of the program. I was no longer invited to go to games or shows with them, and when I did try to reach out over text, they were usually busy with meetings or other AA commitments. One thing AA does well is fill up your schedule, which can be helpful for sobriety, but also leaves very little room for social obligations outside of the program. Connection, honestly, is essential for recovery and for positive mental health. When it comes to AA, my feelings are complicated about its approach and the way that it goes about connection. It fosters connection and safe spaces really well for those new to sobriety, just like any other religious faith-based fellowship would. On the other hand, members tend to be experts at playing the us versus them card and discussing their belief system with an air of superiority. That can wind up dismissive and harmful for connection. Realistically, human nature is to connect and to collaborate, but it's by no means easy, especially if you've been in active addiction for a long time and have isolated yourself from the outside world. If you can see yourself comfortable in a faith-based or religious-based program, then by all means check out the AA program, because it really does connect people very well. But if that doesn't sound like that's something that would interest you, I recommend looking into other programs. There's SMART, there's PATH, and those are local, so there might be ones near you that you could look up. But you could also get involved into yoga or a paint night or a sport. There are other ways to connect rather than just having it focus around sobriety and recovery. For now, thanks for connecting here with me. This has been my way of connecting with people for the 2020 dumpster fire, but next week we will be talking about sponsors. So I look forward to that, and I will see you on Wednesday. Bye. These are healthier. Substance abuse removes the ability to care about or to... Really? Substance abuse removes the ability to care about or to... Wow. With addiction, to remove themselves from isolation and... Wow.